Chapter 3. The Crystal Kingdom. The Tunnel of Light was magnificent. It glowed and pulsated in multicoloured beams that surrounded the children, or rather the animals, as they travelled through at great speed. All of them were still sound asleep and had no idea of what was going on. One by one, each of the animals sped off into a different branch of the tunnel, till the only one left was Rose. And soon hers came to a quick stop, and she landed on what seemed like pink grass in the bright sunshine. After a few seconds, Rose began to stir. Before long, she opened her eyes. It took a moment for everything to sink in, and for her to realise that she wasn't in the garden anymore. She didn't know where she was, but something weird was going on. Everything felt different. She stood up and looked around. As far as she could see, everything was sparkling and shining. It looked as though it was made of crystals, shimmering in the morning light. A soft glow reflected back from the grass, the trees, and the land all about. What was this place, and what was going on?
She could hear the sounds of birds singing, and somewhere not far off, water running, as though there were a stream nearby. It was quite warm and sunny, and although everything did seem a bit weird, she wasn't frightened, just curious. She stood there for a minute or two, and then she started to realise that it wasn't just the world around her that wasn't the same. She was definitely different too. She looked down at her legs, and they were different. They weren't her legs. They were the legs of a horse, and they were pink. Was she a horse now? A pink horse? This couldn't be happening, surely. She started to run towards where she could hear the water coming from, and straight away she could tell she was running faster than she had ever been able to run before. In fact, she was galloping, and as she ran, she was making a sound that was similar to thunder. The water was sounding really close now, and she could see that she was coming up to it fast. As she got closer, she slowed down and walked up to the edge of the river. It was crystal clear blue and was shimmering like no water she had ever seen before. But what was most surprising was the reflection looking back at her. There was no mistaking it now. She had definitely somehow turned into a rather majestic but rather pink horse. It was a good job she liked the colour pink.
It was at that moment that she realised she was also not alone. Walking up to her were more horses, some of them pink, some of them golden, some of them white, each one shining brightly in the sunlight. It was too late to run, if that's what she had planned to do, but she didn't have any plan of any kind, so she just stood there and looked at them. They looked friendly, and sure enough they stopped next to her and just looked back at her in return. Just as she thought her day couldn't be any stranger, one of the horses stepped forward and of all things started to speak. "Do not be alarmed. We will not hurt you. My name is Eden. Please tell us your name and what you are doing here."
My name is Rose, and quite honestly, I don't know why I'm here. I went to sleep last night in my sleeping bag in the garden, and now I'm here. Wherever here is. I really don't know what's happening. The horses looked at each other and started whispering amongst themselves, before another asked, "How did you get here?" Rose looked at them all and started shaking her head. It was about to say that she had no idea, when she realized something. "Oh! It must have been the crystals I found in the woods with my friends. They must have had some kind of power. When we found them, I could see them glowing, but the others couldn't. Somehow they must have brought me here." The horses started to whisper amongst themselves, but this time more excitedly, before Eden spoke again. "Rose, There is no doubt that the crystals you found are magical, and what's more, you were meant to find them. The friends that you speak of will all be here somewhere too. We will help you to find them. Please come with us. There is much we need to discuss, and there is no time to spare. With that, the horses turned and started to gallop away. Rose, realizing that she had little choice, started to follow them.
Georgia recovered from the immediate shock that had somehow turned into a dragon, was in a strange crystal-like world, and could breathe fire and ice. He was actually quite excited now and was flying high up in the sky, looking down at the new world around him. There were mountains and lakes everywhere as far as his eyes could see. Some of them were covered in fire and lava, and some of them were covered in ice and snow. This was the coolest place he had ever seen, and he was ready to explore it all. He swooped down into a valley and landed next to a lake. He was on fire in certain places, but he wondered how that could be possible.
"This is amazing!" he cried at the top of his voice, and it echoed all around. The fire across the lake seemed to move as he carried on looking at it, and suddenly he realized that it wasn't the lake that was on fire. It was some kind of creature laying on an island in the lake, and this creature was breathing fire. George was wondering if the creature was friendly, but he wasn't going to wait around to find out. He flew up into the sky and flapped his enormous wings as fast as he could. He looked back over his shoulder, and to his shock, he could now see that this creature was also a dragon, a much bigger dragon, dark purple in colour, and what's more, it was following him. George wasn't sure what to do. There was no way he could outfly this creature. It was catching up to him fast. The only thing he could think of was that he would have to turn around and fight. He would have to take it by surprise if he had any chance. But it was too late. The dragon had gained on him and was now right by his side. George closed his eyes and wished that he could be back in his sleeping bag. Surely he was too young to die. He thought he was going to cry when suddenly he heard,
I've not seen you around here before, little dragon. Was he imagining things? George opened his eyes and the dragon smiled at him. Where were you flying off to so fast? Don't tell me you were scared of me. I'm not going to hurt you. I just wondered who you were, and I was about to ask you when you flew off so fast. I'm sorry, said George. I didn't know if you were friendly or not. I've never seen a real dragon before. Oh, I see, so you're new around here. I knew I'd never seen you before. Let's go back down and have a little chat. I'd like to hear all about you and where you come from. George decided that he could probably trust this dragon, because if he was going to eat him, he most likely would have done it by now. Okay, I'll follow you down, said George. And with that, they both turned around and headed down to the ground, with George wondering the whole time what exactly was going to happen next. When they reached the ground, George and the dragon exchanged their stories, and as they both spoke, the other listened intently.
After a few minutes of conversation, George had found out quite a lot from this dragon. His name was Eldred, and he was over 500 years old, and he'd spent his entire life living in this crystal world, which he had called Valero 4. George had also discovered that this land had been at war for some years now, ever since the king of the land, Abner, and his pregnant queen Alva had fled to escape the evil intentions of his younger brother, Nerez. None of them had been seen since, as the evil king had gone in pursuit of Abner and Alva, and the only remaining royal figure in the land was Nereza's queen, Mora, who had taken control of most of the kingdom and its subjects. Those that remained loyal to Abner and Alva were not strong enough to overcome the evil Queen Mora, and Mora was not a strong enough influence to overcome their loyalties. This had resulted in a stalemate, with both sides anxious and awaiting their allies. In turn, when George had explained that he, his sister, and their friends had found some crystals in the woods, Eldred's ears pricked up, and he asked him to tell him everything about it. And when George mentioned that his sister often had vivid dreams, including the one last night with the flying pink horse, Eldred let out a cry.
George, from what you have told me, I do believe that your sister and her friends are somewhere here inside Vellery Fort. We don't have time to find them all, but for certain your sister Rose will be with the horses in their kingdom. If we leave now, we can make it there by nightfall. There's no time to spare. On the way, we'll tell the other dragons and gather support. If your sister Rose is who I think she is, we're going to need all the help we can get. George stared at Eldred as he flew off into the sky. He was so fast, George wondered how he'd ever keep up. He took a deep breath and started off after him.